Hello, my name is Brock Stanton. I am a aspiring meteorologist, so today we are going to be talking about mainly two separate areas of severe weather, not nearly as substantial of what we covered yesterday in my video and at the time of recording is ongoing now across a large portion of Mississippi, but we'll be talking about the slight risk across portions of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, West Virginia, and North Carolina, and then as well as a separate area down in northern Florida, southern Georgia, and in extreme southwestern South Carolina. Just for a brief overview what the Storm Prediction Center says before we get into how I analyze this setup. We're going to see the best chance of the tornado is going to be the southern mode, and that's likely going to be earlier on in the day associated with that line of storms that's ongoing across Mississippi now. Damaging winds, there's two separate areas, and we'll break more down into those set up later on, and then relatively low chance of hail, not really too much. So we're going to switch over to our HRRR model, and we're going to start with the setup in the northeast. So this just shows you what this model, we have to switch to the most recent run, and we can see that this model has some morning precipitation moving in, and as we get, and this is like 1 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon now, we see storms start to fire across the slight risk area. And we can see really multiple areas of showers and thunderstorms develop, maybe into a squall line. So it'll be very interesting to see. This is the more aggressive scenario for as far as storm coverage goes. The HRRR, it's much more bullish with storm coverage and intensity, and we'll break down the differences between that in a little bit. So we're going to start with how warm is it going to be getting in the moisture, then we'll break down other severe weather other ingredients for severe weather. And across a large portion of the area, you can see across the more extreme, more northern mode, we get temperatures into the mid and upper 60s, perhaps scraping 70s in a couple places here. Ooh, really warm into the 70s, but mostly mid and upper 60s, some areas hit 70. And you can see the southern area down there, much more widespread, upper 60s and 70s. And then you can actually see the cold front on here. So it's a rough estimation of where the cold front is depicted by the HRRR. So now we see how warm it's going to be, and that's, you really want 70s for severe weather, but 60s can get you severe weather. So now we're going to look, and this is showing the dew point. And as I mentioned in yesterday's video, that really for the northeast, especially in March, you really just need dew points into the mid to upper 50s. And we can see we're going to get that tomorrow, perhaps even, according to the HRRR, getting into the 60s. So this would depict that there would be at least some instability for severe weather, but, we have to look at the upper levels too to determine that instability. So now we're going to look at our mid-level lapse rates. Similar to today's setup on the 30th, the lapse rates aren't going to be too great. Which again, so that's going to limit the instability somewhat. And we can see, again, just for reference, like 18Z is 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lapse rates are not too great. So that does limit our instability somewhat. And we're going to look at our mixed layer CAPE, and we're going to see that we do get values over 500, which, again, you generally want to look for more than 1,000 for severe weather, but 500 can definitely get the job done. So that, and then surface-based CAPE. I think mixed layer CAPE is much more important, but surface-based CAPE is still important to look at. And we can see, you get maybe some areas around 1,000, but generally just 500 to 1,000. So again, sufficient CAPE for severe weather, but nothing too substantial. So now we are going to talk about some of our shear parameters. So we're going to look the upper air 850 jet, which is very important for determining low level shear with a setup, which is important for any isolated tornado potential. And we can see that the best low level shear is probably going to be across this area here. So wherever instability and storms overlap here, this would be a fairly good quarter for some damaging winds. But really anywhere in the purple, it would be reasonable to think you could see some damaging winds, again, solely based off this 850 jet. So you can see it's pretty strong, not as strong as it is across areas of Mississippi with our video from yesterday, but it's more than sufficient for severe weather. It should help make up for some not too strong instability again, but nothing like what we've seen across Mississippi and Louisiana today. So we are now going to look at our bulk shear at the 0 to 6 level, and this is just a good way at seeing how in the mid and upper levels how much shear there is again. And we can see there's definitely sufficient shear for severe weather, generally 50 to 60 knots, and that's pretty good for severe weather. It's pretty good for severe weather. That's the simplest way to put it. Yeah, so then we're going to be looking at our other factors of shear. This is really low-level shear now. And this is important for any tornado potential, which again I think will be very isolated across mid-Atlantic and Northeast, but we can see values are supportive of tornadoes, but really not overly supportive. So these eastern values are more supportive of tornadoes, but I'm just not sure we're going to get a favorable storm mode for tornadoes. You know, it looks to be mostly a linear mode, and a lot of other factors, like factors that made up for the lack of instability today, are not going to be as strong as they were yesterday. And the door opened because my cat just came into the room. Yeah, so the low-level shear values are good and supportive of tornadoes. However, overall, the values will not make up for the lack of instability, like what we saw across portions of Mississippi and Alabama today. So now we are going to move on and take a look at the NAM 3K. And this model, it is much less this model, sorry, my face cam, my face isn't totally in the face cam, but it's much less aggressive because you can see this line of showers here just comes through a little too late, and it doesn't allow enough time for destabilization after this. It's like, so you can see like this is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We still have these showers associated, but they're not going to become robust enough for severe weather. So it kind of just limits destabilization of the atmosphere and makes it more difficult for storms to mature. And you can see eventually these storms get a little more organized for eastern areas over here, and these storms would eventually maybe carry a damaging wind threat. But again, it's much more limited. There's zero surface-based instability in that sounding, so it would be very difficult to get a decent severe weather. So it would be very isolated at most. So I will say now we're just going to show the uncertainty in what this model is showing. We need to go back to the previous run, which between 12 and 18Z, it's most of the same information put into the model. And we can see that has a little more robust scenario. I mean, not like what the HRRR was showing, but you know, a little more storms maturing and as such. So we'll see, but that goes to show the uncertainty for this event. It's not a clear-cut case what we're going to be dealing with. But so now we'll switch back to the most recent run. So we saw the more aggressive scenario for scattered severe weather across portions of the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast on the HRRR. So now we're going to see what's different between that and the NAM 3K. So we're going to look, and as I mentioned with those showers that come through, the Cape really gets limited to these farther south areas. So we take a sounding there, and you can see an isolated tornado would be possible if that comes in. You get pretty solid Cape all around 1,000, which is solid. So the northern mode on this gets pinched off by those showers that come through later in like the late morning and early afternoon hours. So that's the biggest difference. Let's say there is more instability available than what the NAM 3K shows. We're still going to look at its other factors quickly here. And we can see that it's really just the instability limiting this. There's still more than sufficient shear. there is still more than sufficient shear for severe weather. And again, lower levels, we can see sufficient for perhaps an isolated tornado threat. Again, some of these values are high, but you always have to keep in mind there has to be, other things have to be there than just the high shear value, low level shear values to get tornadoes. And so while the system has strong low level shear, just the other factors aren't going to be there. Yeah, so this event is going to be significantly more limited than what you will be hearing about or been seeing in Mississippi, Louisiana, and eventually into Alabama later on. It's just not. The instability is not there. Moisture return's not as strong. Lifting's not going to be as strong. So a much more limited severe threat, but a threat that certainly does still exist. So we see, is there anything else we should be looking at here? We'll look at the lapse rates. We'll just show you how they're consistently not good with this system. Again, yeah, just poor lapse rates, and that, again, will limit updraft organization. So now what we are going to do is we are going to transition over to our severe weather threat farther south. So we're going to go over to the southeast. And for now, we'll just stick with the NAM3K. You can see, so these are storms that are already ongoing as we speak. So, and I'm not really forecasting this area. I made a video on that yesterday, and yeah, it's just too late to make a video on it now. It's really, would have to look at radar trends to determine that. But we can see as we get into the morning, early morning hours, we can see the NAM does show this line of storms still fairly strong. Here, let me try and move this down because I keep going out of the NAM. Okay. You can see there's that especially in this model run, this scenario, really just the Florida Panhandle would seem to get the brunt of the severe weather based off of the NAM3K. We're going to look at our mixed layer Cape, see how much instability there will be for these storms, and we see it's very, very limited. And again, despite strong shear, that's what's going to be limiting this setup, is that the instability will be extremely limited. We'll see lapse rates. I imagine they'd still be very poor. Yes, they are. They're not great. You really ideally want to see values, or want to see colors in the yellow for that, and we just don't get that. Maybe lapse rates over 6. And now we will look at our bulk shear, and this will be favorable for severe weather, but it takes more than shear. You need some instability to get a more organized severe threat. And see, we get favorable shear throughout the day on Thursday, but again, it just takes more than that. This is like a good blend of, it's like a composite indice that blends shear and instability. So it's not perfect, but you can just see how, despite the strong shear overall, the values become very limited because of that instability. And that's a similar thing up in the Northeast, by the way. So now we're going to look. We can see how there's just not much overlap of the instability with the shear. You can see maybe farther north there is in that area. That'll be something interesting to watch if convection does develop there. Now we are going to take a look at the HRRR, and we're just going to see how this evolves. The line, again, this line is ongoing right now, but we can see it weakens some, but still maybe some supercell structures down there in the early morning hours. You can see it continues into the next morning. You can see the storm's a little more mature, maybe some isolated supercell structures. You can see when you see a little hook appendage in the storm, that signals that it's a supercell. Yeah, but still, overall, we can kind of just tell based off the storm maturity that the instability probably doesn't extend too far inland. Maybe with midday it develops a little more, and that's probably why the slight risk expands farther inland, is based off this HRRR solution. But so now we're going to check out our Cape. and we're going to see how, it decreases overnight. Perhaps we start to see some increasing during the morning, but still overall very limited instability of that. But again, we can see how it develops into the early afternoon. This is 1 o'clock now. The instability is just limited with this setup. There's really no other way to put it. Not too much instability is going to be, and that and the fact there's not going to be as strong of a lifting mechanism is going to limit the amount of severe potential there is. Again, definitely still there, especially it seems to be in northwest Florida. You could see perhaps a couple of isolated tornadoes as well on top of damaging winds, and really any stronger core of these storms, and this goes for both areas, could have small hail, perhaps some isolated instances of severe hail, but that weak instability is gonna limit that threat. Again, strong low-level shear, and that's why where there's that greatest instability, you could perhaps end up seeing a couple of tornadoes, especially if we do see some supercell structure storms. And again, this threat, it's not as robust as the 30th was, as today was. Tomorrow, so the severe threat is it's going to be more limited. It's slight risk. That means scattered severe weather is anticipated, so not an outbreak like we're dealing with today. And I believe that we'll check out some soundings first before we wrap up the video. So we're just going to go ahead of these storms, take a sounding, see what the overall environment is. You can see that curvature in the photographs that supports that tornado threat, which is why there's that 5% from the Storm Prediction Center down there, 5% chance of a tornado within a 25-mile radius, and that with, again, some slightly higher instability, still low, but slightly increased instability, that does yield that isolated tornado threat. And then we're just going to check out some more soundings from up north here. Again, remember, especially for this northeast setup, the HRR is the more aggressive solution. But just for if it were to verify, we'll check there. It's not quite enough instability there yet. Let's do that a couple more hours. Okay. It's going to be hard to get a clean sounding because of the storm coverage. So you can see there's a little bit of contamination in the sounding there. Over where my mouse is, that's contamination from the storm. So we can see environment capable of isolated severe weather. And there is that looping photograph, which is why there is that non-zero tornado potential. But again, weak instability, and especially farther north, like a more linear storm mode, is going to leave any tornado threat very isolated. And it seems damaging winds will be the main threat that would drive. If there was a severe thunderstorm watch across this area tomorrow, it would be driven by damaging winds, not hail. I mean, like I said, an isolated instance of severe hail is possible, but really it's going to be limited. Again, we're just going to take some soundings for fun and see them. Really, the directional shear is very bad. Southwesterly winds at the surface. That's no good for severe weather. Here, again, a little more southerly surface winds, but still, see how winds goes like southwest and then a little more south-southwest, like the winds veer a little bit. That's not good for tornado potential. You can kind of see that's why the photograph just goes like this and out like that. It just, again, tornado threat will be very isolated tomorrow. I think that does about wrap up this video. If likely the next time I will be uploading is when there is a outlook that is slight risk or higher from the Storm Prediction Center, so that could be in the day 4 through 8 period if that's the next one, or day 1 or 2, day 3. Well, actually, we'll take a really quick look at the day 4 through 8 outlook from the Storm Prediction Center. So we'll see all days it shows predictability too low, which means there could be severe weather on those days, but confidence is not enough as to pinpoint that area. And we'll see it says that on Monday there could be low-level moisture anticipated over the southern plains and southeast, and depending on how that trough, which is what determines the shear and lift, how that evolves, we could maybe get a severe weather threat there, but again, it's too far out to make a video on. Confidence is just too low in that scenario, so if that threat becomes clear, we will make a video on it, and I will see you again the next time there is a severe weather threat. Bye.